Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. A doggo stood before her mirror in a penthouse apartment overlooking Banana Island, the Lagos skyline gleaming behind her like a dream she had worked hard, though not conventionally, to achieve. Her skin glowed with the help of luxury skincare brands, her wig imported and laid to perfection. Her makeup subtle yet powerful. Everything about her radiated success, but behind the glam was a path paved with charm, calculated seduction, and well-timed departures. Her rise had not come from degrees or inheritance, but from a sharp understanding of what certain men wanted and how to give it to them just long enough to get what she needed. She wasn't a prostitute, at least not by her own definition. She preferred the term survivor. One who had mastered the game of sugar daddies and blackmail. She had moved from a girl who used to hawk groundnuts with her mother to a woman with designer shoes that had never touched red sand. In her mind, she had played the game well, too well to ever fall back into poverty again. Her current sponsor, Senator Ajayi, had been her biggest fish yet. A man in his late 50s, married but reckless. He lavished her with cars, property, and connections. He introduced her to ministers, foreign investors, and kings. With him, she tasted the world in golden teaspoons, flew first class, and sipped wines she couldn't pronounce. But she was no fool. She knew power was like perfume. It smelled great, but it faded fast. And just like perfume, you didn't hold on to it too long unless you wanted to choke. So, when she started noticing strange calls on the senator's phone and hearing whispers about an investigation into his dealings, a doggo began preparing her exit. She moved half her money into a different account, stopped posting with him on social media, and started frequenting events solo. Experience had taught her to know when the tide was turning, and the senator's boat was beginning to sink. The night it all came crashing down. She was sipping champagne with a popular Instagram influencer in Victoria Island when her phone buzzed. A short clip had surfaced online showing Senator Ajayi being dragged from his mansion by EFCC agents, half naked and shouting about injustice. By morning, his properties were sealed, his wife had moved out, and the media was circling like vultures. A doggo didn't flinch. She had already packed her things 2 nights before and moved into another apartment registered under a friend's name. The only thing she left behind was a handwritten note that read, "Thank you for everything, Ajayi. I'll pray for you." She didn't look back. The world was full of men like him, rich, careless, desperate for validation from a younger woman. And she was the kind of woman they all desired. What a doggo didn't know, however, was that her next target wouldn't just change her life. He would ruin it. In the following weeks, Lagos buzzed with gossip about Senator Ajayi's downfall. News stations were saturated with stories of fraud, embezzlement, and alleged occult practices. Some said his village people had finally caught up with him. Others claimed he was betrayed by close friends. But for a doggo, it was just another chapter closed. She had already updated her wardrobe, changed her look, and was back on the scene like nothing had happened. The whispers about her being his side chick died quickly, especially since there were no leaked photos or evidence tying her directly to him. She was smart like that, never too close, never too visible. That was her code. And because she had played it well, no scandal ever stuck. She resumed attending elite parties, luxury brunches, and political dinners. But deep inside, a void was beginning to form. As much as she pretended to love the game, she couldn't help but wonder how long she could keep doing this. Was there an end? A jackpot? Or would it be an endless cycle of upgrades and escapes? That question lingered until she attended a private real estate showcase at the Eco Hotel, hosted for Nigeria's top 1%. She was there on the arm of a friend, an oil tycoon's cousin, when her eyes caught him. A tall, calm, modestly dressed older man who seemed out of place among the flamboyant crowd. While others wore Gucci suits and Rolex watches, he wore a simple native attire, yet people made way for him like he was royalty. Some bowed slightly. Others nodded with clear respect. He didn't say much. He didn't smile. He just walked with a quiet authority that made a doggo's skin tingle. She asked her host who the man was. "That's Chief Dyke," the man whispered with a mixture of reverence and fear. He's one of the richest men in Nigeria, but no one knows what he does. That was all she needed to hear. Her next target had revealed himself. Intrigued and excited, a doggo did her research. No company names tied to him. No family listed. No interviews. Just rumors that he once owned a diamond mine in Congo, that he had oil wells buried in ghost towns, that he had dealings in Dubai, Hong Kong, and Russia. Some even claimed he never aged. But she didn't care about gossip. She saw a man who could change her life permanently. If she played her cards right, she wouldn't need to jump anymore. This one could be her final destination. He didn't have the recklessness of the politicians or the insecurities of the young tech millionaires. Chief Dyke was composed, elegant, and quietly dangerous, the kind of man a doggo believed she could charm, manipulate, and eventually dominate. So she set her plan in motion. She'd find a way to bump into him again, but this time not as an onlooker. This time, she would make sure he noticed her. It didn't take long for a doggo to create the opportunity she needed. Through a former colleague still working in the luxury property firm, she found out Chief Dyke had recently purchased a rare architectural masterpiece in Lekki, a mansion so exclusive it wasn't even listed online. The transaction was done discreetly, with cash, and only 3 people had access to the documents. But money opened doors, and a doggo greased the right palms to get invited to a private art auction where Chief Dyke was expected to appear again. She wore an emerald green dress that clung to her curves with sophistication. Her makeup was flawless, her demeanor effortless. She studied the room like a predator scanning for its prey. When he walked in, quiet yet magnetic, she didn't rush. She let the moment ripen, waited for him to take notice on his own. And he did. Their eyes met across the room. He paused. She held his gaze not with arrogance, but with calculated softness, like an invitation wrapped in innocence. He nodded once, barely noticeable, then walked past. But the seed had been planted. Moments later, an attendant approached her and said, "The chief requests your company for a conversation outside." Her heart raced, but her face stayed calm. She followed the attendant to the terrace, where Chief Dyke stood alone, overlooking the city lights. "You are different," he said, without turning. "Most women scream wealth. You whisper it." A doggo smiled, sensing the game had begun. "I believe mystery is better than noise, Chief." He finally turned to face her, and for the first time, she noticed something unsettling in his eyes. They were calm, but hollow, like windows that reflected everything but revealed nothing. Still, she leaned in, engaging him with witty banter and gentle charm. He was amused, intrigued, and by the end of the night, he asked for her number. From that day, things moved quickly. Chief Dyke began sending her rare gifts, books from ancient libraries, perfumes crafted in secret Paris labs, gold bracelets with inscriptions she couldn't understand. Then came the ultimate offer. He needed a personal assistant, someone trustworthy, discreet, cultured. He claimed he saw potential in her and offered her a contract with benefits beyond anything she had ever known. A doggo didn't hesitate. She believed she had won. She believed she had just secured her last and final upgrade. But what she didn't know was that Chief Dyke hadn't chosen her because she was special. He had chosen her because she was exactly the kind of soul he needed, ambitious, greedy, and blind to warnings. The game wasn't just seduction anymore. This time, she was the prey. The first day a doggo officially stepped into Chief Dyke's residence, as his personal assistant, felt like entering a different realm. The mansion was built like a fortress, yet held the grace of a forgotten empire. It stood far from the noisy chaos of Lagos mainland, nestled quietly within a secluded estate lined with black sedans and ancient trees. The gate was guarded not by men in uniform, but by silent figures dressed in deep brown agbadas, whose eyes never blinked. She noticed no surveillance cameras, yet felt as though her every movement was being watched. As she stepped out of the vehicle that had picked her up, a car smoother and quieter than any she'd ever ridden, her heels clicked against imported marble tiles that led into a hallway colder than the air-conditioned space should allow. At the end stood Chief Dyke, dressed in white kaftan, barefoot, hands behind his back, his expression unreadable. "Welcome, doggo," he said softly, with a nod. "From today, your life begins again." Inside the mansion, every object had a story, though none were shared with her. Sculptures stood in corners, some resembling ancient deities, others contorted in silent screams. The paintings on the wall were haunting, beautiful yet disturbing. One painting in particular, of a woman draped in red with hollow eyes, made a doggo pause. "She looks familiar," she murmured. Chief Dyke glanced at the painting, his voice detached. "She was once like you, curious, gifted, drawn to things she didn't understand." He walked past without elaborating, leaving a doggo confused but determined not to show weakness. She was assigned her own room, larger than her entire previous apartment, with walk-in closets, a gold-framed mirror, and a view of the ocean so pristine it looked like a painting. She noticed there were no clocks anywhere, no digital screens, and no reflections on certain surfaces. The mansion was old, yet alive, breathing, humming, whispering when no one was speaking. Still, a doggo told herself it was all in her mind, just her nerves adjusting to opulence. That evening, as the sun dipped into the Atlantic, Chief Dyke gave her a personal tour. He showed her the wine cellar, the rare library filled with books in languages she didn't recognize, and the meditation room that smelled of something ancient and metallic. Then they reached a corridor with a single red door. He stopped and placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "This door," he said, his tone heavy, "you must never open. Not for any reason. If you hear sounds from within, ignore them. If anyone asks you to open it, even me, refuse. That is the only rule." A doggo tried to make light of it with a half-joke. "Is that where you hide your treasure?" But his face didn't flinch. "No, a doggo. That is where I hide the truth." For the first time since meeting him, she felt a chill creep up her spine. Something deep within her, something buried in instinct, told her to run. But greed whispered louder. She had come too far to turn back. She smiled, nodded, and promised not to open the red door. But curiosity, as always, had a way of breaking promises. Over the following weeks, a doggo lived a life most women only dreamed of. Her wardrobe was upgraded with custom pieces from Italian designers. Her skincare routine was managed by a private dermatologist flown in monthly, and her meals were curated by a personal chef who claimed to have once cooked for a president. Chief Dyke never touched her, never demanded intimacy, and never spoke of love. He treated her like a prized employee, respectful, quiet, and always in control. This confused the doggo. She was used to men throwing themselves at her, trying to buy her with expensive gifts in exchange for physical affection. But Dyke gave her everything without asking for anything. It unnerved her. She began to wonder what he truly wanted. She often found herself staring at him during dinner, trying to read his mind, to decode the mystery behind his stoicism. And though she rarely admitted it to herself, she was drawn to him in a way that felt unnatural. Not romantic, but spiritual, like a moth to fire. One day, while attending a private yacht party organized by one of Dyke's rare associates, a silent billionaire from Morocco, a doggo found herself standing at the edge of the deck, watching the waves with a drink in hand. The air was rich with perfume, laughter, and the murmur of deals being made behind closed champagne glasses. Yet she felt out of place. Most of the women on board were older, heavily adorned, and moved with a certain reverence around Dyke. She overheard one of them whisper, "She's the new one," to another, their eyes filled with both pity and amusement. That night, back at the mansion, a doggo confronted Dyke. "Why did they look at me like that?" she asked. He studied her for a long moment before replying. "Because they once stood where you stand now. They were once chosen. And like you, they thought the world had finally given them what they deserved." The next morning, Dyke offered her a contract, literal, official, and stamped. It gave her access to an account with more money than she'd ever seen, ownership of a property in Dubai, and the option to travel anywhere in the world under his name. "You've passed the test," he said. "This is your reward for obedience, for discretion, and for loyalty." A doggo signed without reading the fine print. In her mind, she had won. She called her friends to boast in vague captions, posted photos of her food and ocean view, and updated her Instagram bio to blessed beyond measure. But in the back of her mind, the red door lingered. She heard soft creaks and faint humming from the corridor at night. She told herself it was just the wind or the ocean. But late one night, when she passed the hallway to retrieve a book, she saw it slightly ajar, and swore she saw the figure of a woman staring back. The door shut immediately, leaving her heart racing. She didn't tell Dyke. She couldn't. She just increased the volume on her music, poured herself wine, and drowned the fear. But fear doesn't drown. It waits. Days passed, then weeks, and the luxury became routine. Adago's life revolved around attending high-profile functions with Dyke, organizing his mysterious calendar, and receiving gifts she didn't remember requesting. She began waking up to strange items placed on her bed, an old necklace with a broken clasp, a feather soaked in what looked like dried blood, a torn photo of herself as a child, which she had never given him. She laughed it off, posting aesthetic pictures and TikToks, but deep inside, unease began to spread like an invisible rash. Her dreams became vivid. She'd find herself in a forest of mirrors, chased by a version of herself with no eyes. Other nights, she was drowning in ink as red hands pulled her into black water. Every time she woke up, her room felt colder. And worse, her reflection in the mirror occasionally blinked slower than she did. One morning, she found a package at her door. No name, no address, just a scroll tied with black thread. She opened it to find a hand-drawn map of the mansion, with the red room circled in heavy ink and 3 dates listed below. The closest was 2 days away. Her fingers trembled, and her breath caught. She took the scroll to Dyke, expecting a laugh or maybe a frown. But when he saw it, he tore it into shreds immediately. "Who gave this to you?" he asked, his voice deeper than she'd ever heard. "No one," she replied truthfully. "It was at my door." Dyke stared at her, eyes darkening. "This place is protected. That map is forbidden. If it happens again, you must tell me." He paused, then added, "Don't betray me, Adago. Curiosity can kill more than cats." She nodded, but the message had already been planted like a seed in her mind. What was behind the red door? Who were the women she had seen in those paintings and dreams? And why did the dates feel like countdowns? That night, her curiosity peaked. She waited until Dyke was away at a meeting, then tiptoed down the corridor. The air grew thick the closer she got to the red door. The humming returned, louder this time, like voices chanting backward in a language her bones recognized but her mind rejected. She reached the door, heart pounding, and placed her palm on it. It was ice cold. Just as she was about to push it open, a scream erupted from behind the door, high-pitched, female, and agonizing. She staggered back in terror. The sound stopped. Silence fell. The door remained shut. She ran to her room, shaking, drenched in sweat. That was the first night she didn't sleep. That was also the first morning she found her mirror cracked, and a message written in blood across the glass. "You already opened it. Now finish it." The following days passed like a slow-burning nightmare. Adago moved through the mansion like a stranger in her own skin, the echo of that blood-written message haunting her every step. The mirror in her room had been replaced by morning, no evidence left behind, and when she confronted the butler about it, he simply responded, "You must have broken it yourself in your sleep, madam." But she hadn't. She remembered it too clearly. The message, the red streaks, the pain in her chest. Now, she couldn't sleep without a light on. She took longer walks around the estate, searching for clarity, trying to convince herself it was stress or some kind of hallucination. But nothing about the red room, or what had happened since, felt like imagination. Every sound, every creak, every shadow felt alive. And worst of all, Dyke began acting different. He was still polite, still calm, but colder, more watchful. He no longer joked or shared old stories, and whenever she tried to bring up the red door, he changed the subject or gave her tasks that led her far from that corridor. Her obsession with the red door became unbearable. She started watching it from afar, timing when Dyke left the house, when the house fell quiet, and when the faint sounds behind the door grew louder. The map she had been given returned, on her bed once again, this time burnt at the edges, and with a single phrase added, "You are the final one." A doggo tried to act normal, but paranoia consumed her. She began researching symbols she saw etched subtly into the mansion walls, carvings in corners and door frames. She discovered they resembled ancient seals once used in African ritual practices, specifically tied to protection and containment. But containment of what? She visited a spiritualist in secret, pretending it was for a friend, and described the mansion's layout. The woman immediately refused to speak more, saying, "You have entered a house where wealth was married to darkness. Whatever walks in that house walks with death." A doggo left shaken, but deep down, she still believed she could control the situation. She had manipulated senators, tycoons, and kings. What was an old man compared to that? But this was no ordinary man. That truth began to reveal itself when her past started crawling back, literally. One evening, while having dinner with Dyke in the marble courtyard, she heard her name screamed from outside the gate. When the guards rushed to block the intruder, a doggo saw a man she once dated, Chimavi, who had gone broke after she left him. He looked homeless, bruised, and wide-eyed with fear. "Don't let her stay," he shouted. "You think this is luxury? You think this man is your blessing? He's not human, a doggo. Run while you still can." The guards beat him, dragged him out, and left a doggo frozen, her fork halfway to her mouth. She turned to Dyke, who simply took a sip of his wine, and said, "People often resent those they couldn't keep." But his eyes didn't match the calm of his voice. Something lurked in them, something that said Chimabi wasn't crazy. He was just too late. The mansion no longer felt like a home, not even a palace. It became a temple of silence, an altar built with invisible blood and invisible chains. A doggo found herself walking on tiptoes, avoiding mirrors, and covering religious statues with her shawls. She wasn't sure what she feared more, the unseen forces she had sensed or the growing realization that Dyke was no ordinary man. Each night, her dreams became more vivid. One night, she dreamed she was trapped in the Red Room, surrounded by faceless women who cried without sound. They held up mirrors to her, but her reflection wasn't there. Another night, she saw herself as a child, crying in a dark field while a version of Dyke stood nearby, whispering something she couldn't understand. It was always the same tone, low, guttural, like wind echoing through a grave. In the morning, her pillow was soaked with sweat, and one night she found red dirt at the foot of her bed. She called a church to send a priest, but no one ever arrived. Her number was blocked the next day. One afternoon, while dusting the library shelves, one of the few duties she still pretended to perform, she noticed a thick, leather-bound book out of place. It bore no title on the spine, just a black wax seal. She opened it slowly and gasped. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, of women. Each photo had a name, a date, and a red X drawn across the image. Most of the women looked beautiful, happy, and well-dressed. But many of them she recognized. One had been a socialite who went missing 5 years ago. Another was a former model rumored to have relocated to Europe. They were all connected to power. And there, at the end of the book, was a blank page with her name written at the top in blood-red ink. A doggone pendulum. No date. No photo. Just her name, waiting. Her hand shook, and before she could shut the book, someone tapped her shoulder. It was Mama Ebel, one of the elderly maids, who hardly spoke. "My daughter," she whispered, eyes full of fear. "Run away. Don't end like the others." And then she walked away, as if her courage had expired. That warning should have been enough. But a doggo didn't leave. Not because she felt safe, but because she didn't know how to leave. Every attempt led to new blocks. Her phone stopped working. The gate wouldn't open unless Dyke permitted it. Her bank accounts returned unauthorized access errors. Her family stopped responding to her messages, and even her backup SIM had been disabled. It was like she had been erased from the outside world. Her clothes were still expensive. Her bed was still soft. But she was a prisoner in paradise. Dyke acted like nothing was wrong. He still smiled calmly at breakfast, still sent her rare perfumes, and still touched nothing inappropriately. Yet the way he watched her, it wasn't affection. It was ownership. She wasn't his lover. She was his investment. The only question that remained was, what did he plan to cash in? The turning point came when her past began hunting her down, not metaphorically, but physically. In the space of 1 week, 3 of Adogo's ex-lovers resurfaced under horrifying circumstances. One was hospitalized after walking into traffic, muttering her name repeatedly and drawing circles on his hospital wall in his own blood. Another, Emeka, a wealthy businessman she once dated for gifts, was caught on CCTV destroying his mansion, screaming, "I should have kept her away. I should have burned her clothes." His wife left him. He disappeared days later. The third, a young tech founder named Philip, uploaded a live video from an abandoned location, eyes sunken and desperate, pleading with viewers, "If anyone knows Adogo Nkemdalam, tell her the devil wants his bride back." The video was taken down within minutes. All 3 men had one thing in common. They were once with her, gave her luxury, and were discarded when they could give no more. Now, it seemed they were paying a price for having known her. But what kind of price, and who was collecting? Adogo spiraled. She stopped eating. Her skin began to pale despite her skincare routine. Her hair, always lustrous and thick, started thinning out. No doctor could explain it, and no prescription worked. She wore makeup to cover the decline, still posted on Instagram like everything was fine, but inside, she was rotting with dread. She tried asking Dyke directly what was happening. "I feel like I'm being punished," she whispered one morning. "Am I cursed?" Dyke looked up from his tea and replied, "You are not cursed. You are chosen. And the chosen don't suffer, they transition." She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. But she didn't. She just nodded, got up, and walked away, back to her room where she locked the doors and tried to pray. But her prayers felt like whispers in a hurricane, drowned, scattered, unheard. That night, she heard footsteps pacing outside her door. When she opened it, no one was there. But at the far end of the hallway stood a woman, young, beautiful, dressed like her, with hair like hers. Adogo called out, but the woman didn't move. She just stared with hollow eyes, then slowly pointed toward the red door. Adogo's knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor. By the time she looked up again, the hallway was empty. The lights flickered once, then twice, then went off completely. Alone in the darkness, Adogo whispered to herself, over and over again, "I should have left. I should have left." But even then, she knew, there was no longer anywhere to run. The mirror shattered on its own. At least that's what Adogo told herself. She had just stepped out of the bath, steam thick in the air, when she caught her reflection in the corner of her eye. But it wasn't her reflection. The woman in the mirror moved a second slower, blinked out of sync, and smiled when Adogo wasn't smiling. Then came the crack. A slow, snaking fracture split across the glass from forehead to chin, followed by a soundless scream that echoed in her head. She collapsed, shivering, heart racing, water dripping down her back. It wasn't just a hallucination. She felt it, an unseen hand hovering too close, a breath not hers brushing against her neck. When she opened her eyes again, the mirror was intact, but her towel was soaked in crimson. She checked her body, terrified, but there were no cuts. Still, the blood was real. That morning marked the beginning of something she could no longer deny. The curse had begun. She rushed to the butler, screaming, panicked, begging to see Dyke. But Dyke wasn't home. The butler merely looked at her with a blend of pity and detachment, saying, "Madam, some doors, when opened, cannot be closed again." She stood there, frozen, feeling more alone than she ever had in her life. The mansion suddenly seemed larger, darker, and more alive. Every creak was a whisper. Every hallway felt endless. The staff, once polite and submissive, now treated her with silent fear. One cook even crossed herself when Adogo entered the kitchen, muttering. Another one swallowed by the house. Her paranoia grew. She tore down curtains looking for hidden cameras, screamed at walls, and stayed awake for nights at a time. The skin beneath her eyes darkened, her appetite vanished, and her once curvy body thinned rapidly. Her designer clothes no longer fit. She looked like a ghost wearing the mask of a socialite. But even more disturbing was what followed next. Time itself started to bend. She lost track of days. Clocks stopped working around her. She would sleep for hours and wake up to find only minutes had passed, or vice versa. Her phone froze, then refused to turn on again. The calendar on her wall started showing dates that didn't exist. On one particularly cold evening, she noticed the trees outside swaying, even though there was no breeze. When she touched the window glass, it rippled like water. She screamed, banging on the window, only for her reflection to stare back and whisper, "You're already inside the book." And that was the moment a doggo finally broke. She fell to her knees and cried, not the elegant sobs of a woman pretending to be distressed for attention, but the raw, guttural wailing of someone who knew she had stepped into something evil and could not escape. She was no longer a guest in a rich man's mansion. She was a name written in the ledger of the damned. A doggo had never intended to open the red room. Not really. Not even when curiosity gnawed at her brain like a starving rat. But after the mirror incident, the time warps, and the shifting walls of the mansion, something shifted in her soul. It was no longer about curiosity, it was about survival. She believed, with all her fading logic, that if she could just understand what was behind that door, she might find a way to reverse everything. So on the third night after her breakdown, she waited until 3 a.m., the hour everything in the house seemed to still, and crept through the long, cold corridor. The red door was ajar again, as if it had been waiting for her. With trembling fingers and her heart crashing against her chest, she pushed it open. The door creaked slowly, and a foul wind brushed her skin like a whisper from a grave. Then she stepped inside. The room was colder than anywhere else in the mansion. Candles lit themselves along the walls, revealing what looked like an ancient shrine. At the center was a table covered in black silk, stained with dried blood, and above it hung a painting of a man who looked exactly like Dyke, but younger, surrounded by skulls, with eyes that glowed red. Around the room were books, old, crumbling, some written in blood. There was a glass case with preserved hearts floating in dark liquid. Most disturbing of all was a large book laid open on a golden pedestal, the ledger. She approached it slowly, her breath shaky, her body shaking. Each page bore names, pictures, dates, and outcomes. Wealth, fame, disappearance, sacrifice. Her eyes scanned the pages rapidly, tears forming. Then she saw it, a doggone chemdulum. Initiated. Final offering. Transformation, incomplete. Below it was a date. It was tomorrow. She screamed and turned to run, only to find the door sealed behind her. The room pulsed. The candles flickered violently, and the painting above the table seemed to smirk. She dropped to her knees and prayed for the first time in years. Her voice cracked as she begged for forgiveness, promised to change, pleaded for mercy. But no voice answered. Only the sound of pages turning in the ledger, by themselves, faster and faster until they stopped again on her name. Then a whisper, deep, ancient, and not from this world, filled the room. You wore the crown of greed. Now you shall wear its chains. The door opened silently. She fled, tripping and crawling back to her room, where she collapsed in a pool of her own sweat and tears. She now understood. This wasn't just Dyke's house. It was a temple of sacrifice. And she was not just another guest. She was the chosen lamb. Morning came like a curse. The sun rose, but the shadows inside the house seemed thicker. A doggo tried to act like nothing had happened, walking through the mansion in silence, observing the staff, who now avoided her entirely. Even the birds that once chirped in the courtyard were gone. The flowers in the garden had withered overnight, and the house felt like it was mourning something or preparing for a burial. She attempted to confront Dyke, to scream at him, but he was gone. No one knew where. The chief has traveled, one maid whispered. But she said it like someone who knew what travel really meant. A doggo staggered to the red corridor, only to find the door locked once again, sealed now with red wax, and a symbol she couldn't recognize. Her head throbbed. Her vision blurred. Then she noticed something new. The floor in front of her door had blood stains. A trail. Her name was scratched into the marble beneath her feet, letter by letter, as though carved with fingernails. She followed the trail, which led to a hidden stairwell at the back of the mansion. It spiraled downward into a dimly lit tunnel that smelled of rot and forgotten secrets. At the end was a second chamber, small, circular, and silent. At the center was a table, and on the table laid a contract. Her contract, the one she had signed weeks ago. Only now the signature glowed red, and below it was written, "Servant of the ledger. Final host. Transfer in progress." Her hand began to burn. She looked down to see her palm slowly forming a mark, a circle with a triangle inside. It glowed. She screamed again, this time louder than before. She tried to tear the contract, but it refused to rip. She spat on it, set fire to it. It remained whole, indestructible. And then, from the corner of the room, a figure emerged, a woman dressed in rags, her mouth sewn shut, her eyes bleeding. She extended her hand toward a doggo, holding a mirror. A doggo looked into the mirror and saw Dyke, but not the Dyke she knew. He was younger, in chains, surrounded by people chanting. Then she saw a ritual, a demon emerging, a pact signed in blood. One man offered, another received. Over the centuries, Dyke had stayed young by transferring the curse to chosen vessels, women like her, who would slowly become the new keepers of the ledger. She was not the first. She was the next. She dropped the mirror and backed away, trembling, breathless. She understood now. The wealth she had enjoyed, the luxury, the attention, none of it was free. Everything had a price. And now, the price was being collected. Her name had already been written. Her blood had already been marked. Her time was already running out. A doggo didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. Her body throbbed with exhaustion, but her mind remained alive with terror and strategy. The curse was no longer a myth or superstition. It was real, and it was claiming her. She knew staying one more night in the mansion could seal her fate, yet the mansion itself seemed to stretch and bend time, trapping her in a house that no longer obeyed the natural rules of life. She rummaged through her old belongings, searching for anything that hadn't been tainted: an old SIM card, a forgotten USB drive, a photograph from her previous life. Everything electronic had been disabled, wiped, or disconnected from the outside world. Her designer phone turned on briefly, only to display a message she'd never seen before: connection denied, host bound to source. Shivering, she realized she wasn't just being haunted. She was being integrated into something. Something dark. Something unholy. But she wouldn't give in without a fight. The first thing she did was change into simple clothes: a hoodie, jeans, sneakers. The same attire she had worn back when she was just another hustling girl in Lagos, years before all the diamonds and Dubai trips. She packed a small backpack and stuffed it with what little cash she had remaining. When she approached the mansion gates, 2 guards blocked her path without speaking. "I'm going to the pharmacy," she lied, trying to sound composed. "I'm not feeling well." One of them looked at her, his eyes sunken and strangely distant, and said, "Madam, the chief said no one is to leave. Not until the transition is complete." Her blood ran cold. She backed away, thanking them stiffly, heart pounding as she returned to the house. She hadn't told them about her plan. She hadn't told anyone. How did they know? The walls had eyes. The house had ears. She had become a prisoner. And worse, a prisoner no longer certain of who she could trust. Still, she wasn't ready to give up. That night, she searched for hidden exits, back doors, anything. She found an underground tunnel once used by old staff to smuggle in rare antiques. It led beneath the estate, through sewage routes and forgotten passageways. She waited until midnight and crept down, her phone flashlight trembling in her hand. The deeper she went, the colder it became. Rats scurried past her feet. At some point, she thought she heard footsteps behind her, but didn't dare turn. She moved faster. Then, just as she reached a ladder that led to a manhole near the estate's perimeter, she heard it. A voice. Deep, echoing, calm. "You can leave a doggo, but you'll leave as a shadow." She turned around. No one was there. She climbed frantically, pushed open the manhole, and gasped for air. But as she crawled out into the night, the sky didn't look like Lagos. It was red. The trees were twisted. The stars were blinking like eyes. She hadn't escaped the mansion. She had gone deeper into it. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a hallucination. What Adago had discovered was a deeper level of the mansion, a spiritual realm crafted from every soul the house had consumed. It was a mirror version of reality, twisted by pain, greed, and fear. The colors were darker, sounds more distorted, and time moved like a pendulum caught in chaos. As she wandered through the ghostly landscape, she saw flashes of herself. In one scene, dressed in wedding attire, crying blood. In another, crawling naked through ash, whispering the names of men she once manipulated. The mansion had taken her memories, twisted them, and painted them across this underworld like a cursed museum. She saw other women, too, souls stuck between dimensions, weeping, screaming, some laughing hysterically. One grabbed her by the wrist and begged, "Tell my mother I didn't run away. He made me stay." Then the woman vanished into the wind. Adago screamed. She wanted to run, but the ground kept shifting beneath her feet. Suddenly, Chief Dyke appeared, not as the elegant, composed man she once knew, but as a younger version of himself. His face was smoother, but his eyes were voids. Around him swirled smoke and ash, and beneath his feet, the shadows of women's faces cried out in agony. "You've seen the truth," he said softly. "And yet, here you are, still trying to fight." Adago fell to her knees. "Why me?" she cried. "Why not someone else?" Dyke walked around her slowly, his voice echoing without air. "Because you are the perfect host. You took from many. You never gave back. You rose on broken hearts and discarded men. You worshipped wealth without asking where it came from. Now you've inherited the price." He offered his hand. "Accept your place. The suffering will stop. You'll have power beyond wealth. You'll never age, never hunger. Just say yes." For a moment, her pride wavered. Power? Eternal beauty? Escape from this torment? It was tempting. But then she remembered Chimabi's face, Philip's cries, Emeka's madness. She saw her reflection in Dyke's eyes, not as she was, but as she would become, a shell, hollow, feeding on others. She slapped his hand away. "I'd rather rot than become like you." Dyke's smile faded. The ground cracked. The walls of the red dimension trembled. "Then rot you shall," he said, and with a wave of his hand, the sky above her shattered like glass. She fell, screaming, plummeting through layers of memory and nightmare, until she woke up, back in her room. The sun was shining. Birds were singing. Everything looked normal. But as she sat up, panting and sweating, she saw her palm glowing faintly. The mark had returned. Her rejection of the deal had not freed her. It had only begun the next level of her torment. Adago no longer recognized herself. The once beautiful girl who had posted glamorous selfies and flaunted luxury handbags was now a husk, thin, pale, eyes sunken like a corpse. Her beauty faded faster than time allowed. Her hair thinned, her lips cracked, her skin bruised under soft touches. No matter what she applied, creams, oils, serums, nothing worked. The doctors she had once flown in from France no longer returned her calls. Even her social media pages had vanished. When she tried logging into Instagram, it said, "This account does not exist." Her name no longer brought admiration. It brought fear. Every friend she reached out to rejected her. They either blocked her, claimed not to remember her, or whispered rumors that she had gone insane. She tried to warn them. "Please, don't come near this house. Dyke isn't what you think." But her words fell like sand through fingers. No one believed her. Why would they? She had once laughed at the broken. Now she was worse than they were. The mansion was now her cage. The doors opened but led to nowhere. The windows showed the world, but never allowed escape. At times, she would walk into her bathroom and end up in the red corridor. Once, she tried smashing a mirror with a vase, only for the mirror to bleed and whisper, "We see you." She cried herself to sleep and woke up screaming. Her meals began tasting like ash. Her body itched from invisible insects. And sometimes, when she looked at her hands, she swore she saw them fading, becoming transparent like a ghost. Dyke visited rarely now, but when he did, He looked younger each time. "You're fulfilling your purpose," he said casually once, sipping wine. "With every day you suffer, I grow stronger. Isn't that what you wanted? To be the reason a man became great?" She lunged at him, screaming, but he vanished before she could touch him. The air laughed around her, and for the first time in her life, she wished for death. But death would not come. That was the curse. Dyke had not chosen to kill her. He had chosen to leave her alive, to suffer, rot, and wither with no end. She could not die. Not until her replacement arrived. Until another woman, drawn by greed, walked through the mansion gates and signed the next contract. Until then, a doggo was both prisoner and host. She cried at night, whispering apologies to men she had wronged, to God she had abandoned, to herself. But no redemption came. The house had swallowed her completely. Every mirror bore her face, but not her soul. Every corner whispered her name like a curse. And though she lived, she envied the dead, because the dead were free. It began slowly, barely noticeable at first. A call from a cousin who lived far away, complaining of sudden illness and inexplicable dreams featuring a doggo. Then her childhood best friend, Amara, who hadn't spoken to her in years, sent a frantic voice message, crying and saying, "Something's wrong. I keep seeing your face in my sleep, but your mouth is sewn shut and you're pointing at a grave with my name on it." At first, a doggo dismissed it as coincidence, but as the days passed, the pattern worsened. Everyone she had once known even briefly, people she had smiled at in the lobby, men she had flirted with for favors, housekeepers she had insulted, all began to suffer strange misfortunes. Business losses, accidents, sudden madness, unexplained deaths. She tried to isolate herself to protect them, but it was too late. The curse wasn't confined to the mansion anymore. It was inside her, spreading like a virus, poisoning everything connected to her spirit. She watched in horror as messages poured in, some begging for help, others cursing her for destroying lives. A former schoolmate sent a video of his wife screaming in their sleep, calling a doggo's name, then collapsing into seizures. A popular influencer who once invited her to a beach party posted a video of herself babbling nonsense before running into the street and being hit by a truck. A doggo sat in the mansion, shaking, sobbing, unable to help. She had once craved attention, but this was not the spotlight she desired. She turned off her phones, disconnected from everything, but the voices still reached her, through dreams, through the walls, even through whispers in her food. Dyke never appeared during these episodes. It was as if he had faded into the background, watching from somewhere unseen, feeding off her pain like a god savoring the worship of a bleeding priestess. One morning, she awoke to find a letter on her nightstand. It was written in delicate handwriting, signed simply, "One who came before you." The letter explained that once the ledger had accepted her name, her soul became a tether, a chain that drew in destruction wherever she existed. The previous bearer, a woman named Lucinda, had suffered the same fate and had tried to end it by burning herself alive, only to wake up unharmed, inside the mansion again. The curse didn't kill. It simply ruined, slowly and completely. "You cannot die," the letter read, "but you will destroy until you are replaced. And even then, your screams will echo here until the end of time." A doggo dropped the paper, clutching her head as if to pull out her own hair. She screamed, clawed at her skin, punched mirrors. But nothing changed. She was no longer just cursed. She was now the curse itself. With madness tightening its grip, a doggo turned to desperation. She remembered names of prophets she once laughed at, churches she once mocked, herbalists she had seen only on documentaries. If science failed, maybe the spiritual would offer a cure. Disguised in a face mask, scarf, and old clothes, she paid one of the mansion's youngest houseboys to sneak her out one rainy night. He was afraid, but she promised him millions, money she no longer truly had. Once outside the mansion's gates, the world looked different. People didn't notice her anymore. She walked the streets like a shadow, unseen, invisible to cameras, absent from reflective surfaces. She begged her way into the compound of Prophet Anyakachi, a controversial miracle worker known for his televised deliverance sessions. When she told his assistant her name, he stiffened and ran inside. Minutes later, the prophet appeared, eyes wide with shock. "It's you," he whispered. "The girl from the dream. The one who walks with blood." He led her to a prayer chamber, poured oil on her head, and began to pray fervently. For a moment, a doggo thought it was working. She felt fire run through her veins, saw flashes of her past, of Dyke, of the red door. But then the lights blew out, the room went ice cold, and the prophet dropped to the floor, convulsing violently. When he woke up, he was blind. "Leave this place," he screamed. "You're not just cursed, you're claimed. Even I cannot help you." A doggo ran, sobbing, only to find the houseboy who helped her had been struck by a motorcycle outside. She knelt beside his lifeless body, shaking him, screaming. People gathered, but no one came close. They looked at her with fear, as though she were a ghost. "Witch," someone whispered. "Demon." Another spat on the ground. A doggo stood and ran, but no matter how far she went, the city pushed her out. Roads closed. Cars refused to stop. Phones wouldn't ring. It was as if the world itself had decided she no longer belonged. She went to a native doctor deep in the forests of Ogun State, one known for dealing with spirits and ancient bindings. He listened silently, then asked her to bring a personal item of Dyke's. "If I touch his essence, I can try," he said. She returned to the mansion in the dead of night and stole an old ring from his study. But the moment the ring crossed the forest boundary, the ground shook. Thunder clapped. The native doctor caught fire, literally combusting, and screamed until he was ash. His assistants fled. A doggo fell to her knees, surrounded by silence, smoke, and ruin. She had tried everything: medicine, religion, traditional power. But none of it worked. No one could save her, not even herself. As she wandered back into the city, barefoot and broken, she realized the truth. She was no longer a victim looking for deliverance. She was a vessel, full overflowing, and leaking poison into everything she touched. It happened just as the sun was setting. A doggo, now a gaunt figure wrapped in tattered clothes, sat beneath a bridge near the outskirts of town, mumbling to herself. Her once pristine nails were broken, her eyes bloodshot, her feet cracked and bruised. Stray dogs walked around her without barking. Even they sensed something was wrong. Then a black Rolls-Royce pulled up across the road. The driver didn't speak. The back door opened, and out stepped Chief Dyke, fresh, youthful, glowing with the arrogance of a man whose strength had returned. He walked up to her and crouched beside her as if she were an old friend. "You look tired," he said, his voice calm. "Is this what you wanted?" A doggo didn't look up. "Why didn't you just kill me?" she croaked. Dyke chuckled. "Because death is too merciful. I don't punish. I transform." He placed a small gold box in front of her. "Last offer, a doggo. Come back. Accept the role. Be my vessel in peace, not pain. You will live forever. Rule quietly. No more suffering. Just say yes." She stared at the box. Her body ached. Her soul begged for rest. Her memories played tricks on her, visions of her mother's laughter, the streets she used to walk with confidence, the mirror selfies, the lavish trips. The life that felt like a dream now. Could she go back to being powerful? Could she silence the voices? Could she matter again? All it took was one word. One yes. But in her silence, she remembered the voices of those who had suffered because of her. Chimabi, Amara, the prophet, the houseboy. She remembered every name in that ledger. Her eyes burned. Her throat tightened. Then she spat at the box. "I would rather rot in this gutter than stand beside you again." Dyke's smile faded. He stood slowly, brushed his sleeve, and nodded. "Very well. Let the rot continue." He turned and walked away. The Rolls-Royce vanished as silently as it had arrived. She sat there, shivering, weeping not out of fear or regret, but because she had finally chosen dignity over desire. And with that choice, her final fate was sealed. Not death, not redemption, but endless decay. Her body would never die, but it would never heal. Her name would never be spoken again, but her spirit would linger, ruining everything she came near. She was no longer a woman. She was a curse in motion, a warning to every soul who chased luxury without asking for the source. And as the wind howled through the empty streets that night, even the spirits whispered her name, not with reverence, but with fear. The city forgot her. It didn't take long. Weeks passed, then months, and Hidalgo became nothing more than a ghost story told in whispers. To some, she was a madwoman who used to be rich, but lost her mind chasing power. To others, she never existed at all. Her name was gone from social media, her photos wiped from every account, every archive, every server. Even the men she once dated no longer recognized her in old pictures. She had been erased, not from existence, but from memory. Yet she still lived. Day by day, moment by moment, her body continued to function despite every part of her feeling broken. Her skin no longer healed. Her voice cracked when she spoke. When she walked the streets, people crossed the road. Birds wouldn't fly over her. Dogs whimpered at her scent. It was as though nature itself wanted to push her out of reality. And yet, the curse would not let her die. She wandered from place to place, under bridges, behind abandoned buildings, sometimes sleeping in old churches only to be dragged out by terrified priests. Wherever she stayed, misfortune followed. One woman who gave her a blanket found her house burned down the next week. A man who offered her food lost his son in a mysterious accident the following morning. Hidalgo stopped accepting help not because of pride, but because she was afraid of what her presence would cost others. In her moments of clarity, she would stare at the sky, whispering prayers not for herself, but for someone, anyone, to find the ledger and destroy it. But deep inside, she knew the truth. It could not be destroyed. It was not just a book. It was a binding between worlds, a gateway that demanded suffering in exchange for power. The moment she signed that contract, she had become part of the chain. And the chain did not break. It only moved forward. Her hair turned white, not with age, but from the sheer weight of guilt and horror. Her once vibrant eyes were now dull stones set into a gaunt face. People no longer recognized her, but they feared her. Children cried when she walked by. Pregnant women turned the other way. And yet, despite it all, she continued. She breathed. She walked. She thought. But each day felt longer than the last. The only reminder of who she used to be was a cracked phone she kept hidden, though it no longer worked. In it were her last pictures, Hidalgo smiling beside a luxury car, flaunting a red dress and a champagne glass, while thousands had praised her beauty. Now she sat beneath a broken bridge, swatting at flies and rocking gently, mouthing forgotten prayers. She wasn't waiting for death. She was waiting for her replacement, the next girl who would walk into Chief Dyke's world, blinded by the same hunger that once ruled her. Years passed. Seasons changed. Lagos evolved, but Hidalgo remained trapped in time. She heard rumors, whispers carried by wind, fragments of conversations floating from passing cars. Chief Dyke had returned to the city spotlight, now going by another name, Obinadi Afani, the mysterious CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. His new mansion stood taller than the old one, glass and gold shimmering under the sun, and women once again flocked to his gates. Young, ambitious, desperate women, just like Hidalgo once was, fighting for his attention, posting about gifts they received, gushing about how kind and refined he was. They didn't ask questions. They didn't know about the ledger. And Dyke? He didn't need to say a word. He only smiled, nodded, and waited. Just as he had waited for Hidalgo. The game had restarted. The cycle had returned. The mansion had a new red door. A new host would soon be chosen. Meanwhile, Hidalgo's days melted into shadows. She no longer hoped, no longer dreamed, but she watched. From afar, she lingered near the edges of Dyke's new estate, her presence cloaked by the curse that had rendered her invisible to those not already marked. She saw one girl in particular, young, bright-eyed, with the same hunger Hidalgo once carried in her chest. The girl posted often, always tagging Dyke, always thanking him for changing her life. Hidalgo tried to warn her once, approached her in a dark corner, grabbed her wrist. "Don't go back," she whispered hoarsely. "He's not what you think. There's a book, a room. Run." The girl pulled away, disgusted. "Get your hands off me, witch," she spat. "Jealous beggar." She ran off, and a doggo collapsed against a wall, weeping not from anger, but sorrow. That girl was already in the ledger. Her fate was sealed, just like hers had been, and there was nothing a doggo could do about it. On one final evening, as rain fell in quiet sheets over the city, a doggo walked to the ocean. Her legs shook, her body ached. Her reflection in a puddle revealed not a woman, but a wraith, hollow, forgotten, and yet deeply aware. She stood at the shoreline, wind howling, and spoke into the storm. To the next girl, she said, "I tried to warn you. I failed. But may you, at least, leave a message behind. May you find the strength to fight." She opened her hands, and the mark that once glowed with Dyke's binding now shimmered faintly, as if dimming. She would live, but she would never be whole, never be free. She turned back from the sea and disappeared into the night, swallowed by the world she once ruled with beauty and lies. Behind her, the ledger remained open, the ink still wet, and the next name was already being written. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.